Welcome to another episode of the VR Creators Podcast. And today I have Manuel on. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Hello, everyone.
Cool. So, do you want to go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself so they know what they're getting into?
Sure. So, who's this guy? So, my name is Manuel Sainsily, but most people know me as Manu.Vision or Manu. I'm a futurist. That's how I call myself. I've been trained as a designer in UX and UI, everything related to AR, VR, haptics, emerging tech, and more recently, computer vision and artificial intelligence. I'm from Guadeloupe, which is a French Caribbean island in the West Indies. So, what I care about deeply is ethics, diversity and inclusion, and ecology. I got a Master of Science in Computer Science back in 2013, and since then, I've only been working with emerging tech company like IBM, where I consulted, Unity right now, where I manage a team of product designer, and I collaborate with teams and companies like Meta, OpenAI, on emerging tech again. So it's very exciting to be on this panel because I've been actually watching a lot of your content to learn how to make VR. Even if you work at Unity, Justin is known internally and we actually watch your video.
Yeah.
So if you're watching this channel, you're on the right place.
That's fun. That's the cool part about being like a VR person is like there's like literally like 4 or 5 of us that are teaching
Yeah.
VR stuff. So it's a very small pool. So, how useful was your computer science degree in this world of tech that you've gotten into?
I think that's the best question you can start with because um, I would say two things. I would say back in 2013, absolutely useful because just learning how to talk to a computer, like understanding the architecture. I got a little bit of background in coding language, even though I'm a designer and I'm mostly design, understanding, code and Objective C and object oriented code and so on. It was important to have that background at the time. And it gave me, especially in the French school system, if you don't have a degree, no company want even to interview or watch your resume. So it was a kind of a door opener. Nowadays, I would say completely useless. And not to say kids drop school, this type of message, but more about I think we have access to so much free knowledge right now, or even paid but custom knowledge, more niche to what you need. And if you got access to YouTube, if you know some creators that you really love and you feel like they are a good educator, I would recommend people to actually try to learn on themselves before paying $5,000 to $10,000 a year on a degree, because companies don't care that much anymore about your education, but more about your practical experience. So if you can build a portfolio of prototypes, I think it has more value than saying, I've learned 5 years about this thing and this paper proves it.
I think that's what colleges are kind of missing right now is that the time to knowledge is has been significantly reduced. Like before the internet age, going to college made sense and like that's, just the greatest source of knowledge and information possible. But nowadays with everything moving so fast, like if I can, get into VR like right after graduating high school, and that's a whole nother debate is what you get taught in high school. But if you like make it past high school and like get to the point where like okay, well I want to learn VR, and you can teach yourself in 3 months, and then you can work for another 3 months on like projects that are going to build your portfolio out. I think that's super helpful.
100%. There's one thing I could add though, which is maybe a component that not everybody actually sees, but I mean, right now I'm public speaking. I'm always, confident on camera and things like that because I've been doing it for so long that it becomes a second nature. But I'm actually very introverted. I love being at home, work at night, my dimmed light and everything, being in my zone, right? And I think most developers, most designers can relate to that creative mindset that flourish at nights. But there is this component of being social, being able to be with other people around, being able to collaborate. And even if you're a solo dev or even if you're learning on your own, you still need at some point to talk to someone or need help from someone or just need to grow your business and partner with people. And being in school, it's the main reason why society has schools is to actually just educate you on the social level. And I must say the university time for me was very useful for that, to be able to have friends that are going through the same thing, have relatable contacts that even 10 to 15 years later we know each other, we work in different companies, we can have insights from each other, and we can just make sure that am I crazy doing this? No, you're doing it too. So that feels right. So I would say if you're not going through the conventional route of going through university, just make sure you join communities, whether it's on Discord, whether it's in person. but making sure you keep that relationship level because you'd still need this in life at some point.
Yeah, that's honestly the way my I got a degree in software engineering. And the I think the one useful benefit to having that degree was getting my first internship right out
Right.
of college, or like during my senior year. And after that, like all the coding I taught myself. Like, I would sit in the lecture and like get rambled at by this professor who's like too old for like the current language he's trying to teach you, and like they're trying to teach, and they were, oh gosh, the class I took, they were teaching Java and C sharp at the same time. So it was
Whoa.
like all the examples were like in a language that I'm not actually trying to learn, and like it's just it was interesting. But so I ended up just teaching myself everything. But the connections that you were mentioning that you made during college, and and I think it was connections also that got me like my first internship, because it was like a friend of, a friend's dad or someone who like, had a connection in the company. And then honestly, like once you get your first job, like nobody really cares about your college degree anymore. But
Nope.
yeah,
And
you're
same
like,
as
oh
you,
yeah,
the first job. That's
you have
what's needed.
experience. You're fine. And now I think more and more people are starting to see that. So what was your so you've kind of hit a lot of areas in this tech
Yeah.
industry. What's kind of been your journey? Like how did you manage that? How did you get to this point?
So I think it's curiosity that drives me at the core of all of what I do. I'm always just interested to know, what's the next big thing? What is something that can help humans in 10, 15, 20 years from now? That's the work of a futurist, is to always kind of have a footstep in advance, but not because it's cool, but because you help inform what needs to be done today to get there. Like what I always say is that, sci-fi has been pouring dystopian futuristic sci-fi for the past 40 years, and it just, instead of doing the job of telling us not to do, he basically laid out the blueprint and the patterns to be actually achieving that futuristic dystopia. So instead, I'm trying to think about, if I want a better future for me or my kids, what should I be doing right now, or informing companies right now if I'm advising them, so that we can get there appropriately. And so when I started my school, my goal was very just simple. I was just like, I have this very cool story that I want to tell that is, inspired by the Caribbean, but I'm tired of seeing superheroes that are always looking like other countries and nothing from here. So I want to make my own video games, or I want to make my own movie, and what are the skills that I need to learn to make this? And I was on, early things like RPG Maker. I even had Unity installed at the time, but it was not user friendly. Not saying that it's still, better, but it evolved, that list. And I think that even if it's scary at first, at least it allows you to empower anyone to do something. And I'm here on this podcast not representing my company, by the way. I'm just talking as Manu, working at Unity, not a Unity representative. I use Unreal sometimes, and I think people at Unity all use different tools. And it's very interesting to think about what are the different skills that I could learn to achieve that goal. And I always remained in tune with the next futuristic approach, because it will give me a sense of the broad, tech universe, metaverse, how we call it right now. There's so many different technologies that you can use to achieve that. That for me was always about, if I add one more string to my bow, I might be able to send that arrow further. So at the beginning, it started with computer science. And to be honest, I actually started the wrong school. I thought it was a school for design. And I was 1 year in, and I was like, I cannot tell my mom that we just spent 5,000 USD on the wrong school. So I'm just going to go through,
Oh
I'm going to learn,
no.
and we'll see. And it was the best thing I ever did, the best mistake I ever did, because I was from the Guadeloupe Caribbean, right? And most people go to France after that because it's a French colony that became a country part of France. But going to Montreal, Canada was what I did thanks to that school. And he allowed me to see something completely different. I was in the North American market, but also still speaking French. So I was confident that I could do both. Same time zone as my family, so I could still be in touch with them. And the goal was to just would do 1 year. And if it goes well, I might continue. 12 years later, I'm still in Montreal. I'm Canadian now. I speak fluently English by just talking. And I feel like that actually helped me, achieve that level of freedom that I would have maybe not get if I stayed home and continued with just a design route. And so when I went in computer science, my first job, like you, out of school, was, I think I was working for McDonald's, but not making food, but actually their menu board design. And already there, I was like, we're using Flash, and it was a moment of moving to HTML5. So I had to learn web design. I had to understand how to code a little bit. I had to understand how to animate things. But already I was thinking of the spatial effect of those menu board that are just behind the counter, making you want to buy that burger. What I was thinking is, if someone entered the room, there's smell involved, there's different senses. How can I get those people to buy more and to have a good experience doing it? So I was already thinking VR, even though it wasn't on your face, it was still a spatial design that you had to put in place. So moving into these different jobs, then I moved to consulting, making apps and mobile. I was always thinking, how can I make that experience better? So machine learning was the next step, thinking about the human behavior and training people. So I had to learn those different skills on my own time, always just curious after work, putting the laptop down at 5 p.m. and going on YouTube. And eventually, when I worked to IBM, I was able to talk to the right person to just add more of those skills. That's when I learned 3D. That's when I learned Unity and XR. And it's kind of a normal route. I feel like everybody that is in the XR space, you ended up understanding a little bit of 3D modeling, even though you're not the best 3D artist. You ended up understanding a little bit of code, even though you're not the developer that will build an app from scratch. And you're just using those different pieces to just achieve your goal, which is building a world or creating a story. So I feel like it's a normal continuation. And now with AI, generative content is something that can just accelerate that. So I'm learning and using AI for that.
Next steps AI. I do like that approach. It's I've actually seen that kind of recently with the rise of Alex Hormozy, if you've seen his content, but he talks about skill stacking a lot, where he'll, make a certain amount by learning, computer science, and then you add something else on top of that, like, okay, well, now I know how to make, apps, and so, and then I can add a more, professional like skill, and so now you have all these skills to like design and apps, um and you've kind of been in the metaverse the whole time too,
Yeah.
and you just like add skills on top of each other, and you just become more and more valuable every single skill you learn.
Yeah.
And the it is pretty cool, like you have stuck a lot of people don't really understand the metaverse, as it were, and it's such a buzzword right now, and it's like, oh,
I hate
it's
it.
NFTs, or it's like, uh, nobody knows. It's this VR world that everybody's gonna live in, and it's like, no, it's really just it's more or less the internet. Like, it's you've been living in the metaverse this whole time. Like, the phone that you carry around with you is the metaverse. It's just the way you interact with it right now is through a phone instead of through an AR glasses or a VR headset or whatnot. So,
I think
um,
people like you and I are creative technologists, if that's one term we can use. And I hate putting a title on it because then you're part of that bubble and job description. And yeah, I do only
yeah.
that, nothing else. But you're an artist. I've seen you building VR world where you had to think about what the grass movement will be when the wind hits it. And this is something that a Bob Ross will do on a painting, static, but it's still art. And yes, you have to think about how do I populate, the blades of grass on the terrain topology in Unity. That's the technical side, but the goal was to make something that feels good when you walk in it in VR. And I think that that creativity coupled with technology just unlocks superpowers. And a huge part that maybe people that are just creative or just technology miss is the business side. You have to think how to monetize that if you want to do more of it without having to follow a manager. Or you have to think about collaborating in an agile environment if you're a product designer and you're working with, a budget or a product that has to come out at some point. So understanding a little bit of I would say the boring stuff for me was very important in my career. If not, I would have remained a graphic designer or an illustrator, which is either paid very much less than designers or don't have a say in making something. And for me, it was important to be having a little bit of leadership. I've been managing people as well. I've been mentoring and helping just because I don't want to give back to people that have give to me, but also because the more you have that control in a company, whether you work for yourself or for a business, the more you have a say in the piece. And it's important, I think, for creatives to get a little bit of control, not because you want to have the hat and manage that. It's not the ego part. It's more about if you care deeply about what you're doing. If you're just sitting on the back seat and you're not controlling the car, you cannot, save the people that are on the road and, serving
Hmm.
on the steering wheel. And that's important to at least have a little bit of your hand on it.
I agree. I think it's a lot of things all culminated into one. And I do like to say that VR or AR, I guess now, is like the truest form of art, because you're just combining all of the art forms into one medium. So you have, like actual like art that you can put in there. You have 3D artist and design and stuff. You have the storyline behind the game that you're playing. There's the code, which is kind of an art of it in and of itself that's like hidden in the background, the music that's involved, all of, everything that you touch and like the way you experience things. It's really like a culmination of all the different art mediums into one, which is super cool.
Okay, so you're hitting something interesting here. So a big part of what I've done the past 3 years is actually hidden in one job title, which unfortunately because of COVID I had to leave after 9 months, and it was haptician. And haptician is basically a mix of the word haptic, which means sense of touch in Greek, if we make it simple, and so vibration on your dual sense controller on your PS5 or the Joy Cons on your Switch, the Taptic engine on your phone when it vibrates. I've worked at companies called Immersion that have been doing the patents for those implementations. So I've worked with Nintendo, Sony, Apple. And then you have magician, which is the second part of the word. And magician, why they call themselves haptician is because they are creating a sense that people are not really used to in, I would say, media or technology. And it's the sense of touch. We usually have audiovisual, and people talk about VFX and audiovisual experience all the time. But how restrictive is this, right? Audiovisual is just two, and you're missing so much more. And the core five senses, yes, but there's so much more hidden senses, like the sense of, I don't know, perception of presence, like when you're in VR, or when you get motion sickness, the sense of being, static on the world, and so on. And I feel like I love what you said by saying it's the true representation of art. I do think that there's more to it that we're not yet capable of hitting, or that the technology might be there, but scattered across different companies that are competing at the same time. They are not joining forces to actually make it happen. And I think that the long-term vision that I see for this is a true simulation in a sense. And the moment that you put or activate that simulation, and I'm not saying from a hardware perspective that it has to be a headset or glasses or whatever, but the second you will be in it, it will be truly indescribable from the real world, indistinguishable. And if there might be some safe space that allow you to at least distinguish it and to remove yourself from it, but it would allow you at least in that moment to be in the zone, to be in the flow. And it would be very interesting to be able to smell, to hear music, to touch stuff, and to have the same feeling that you would have when you actually touch real objects in the real world. And gaming was represented in the past as a true form of art because it allowed people to really tell stories, but that are interactive. Because movies is already one step and it's great, but you don't have control on the storyline. Gaming,
Hmm.
someone else is still telling the story, but you have a little bit of interactions with it. VR, well, you're part of the story now. You're not just controlling a character, you are the character. So the next step for me is all of that, stack it up, like you said earlier with the tech, and add a little bit of senses that we're missing.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, I do like the even the hidden senses that you were mentioning, like being able to make eye contact with a character in VR is a wild feeling if you haven't experienced it before. Like going through some short stories. I don't remember the name of, can't remember any names off the top of my head. There's one where it's like there's one with a hedgehog, and I can't remember the name of it. But
Oh,
like the point of the like, I was watching some like the creation of it, some videos about it, and the developers were talking about how important it was that the little character was actually making eye contact with you and then like made you feel like you were present in the scene as you were watching this like movie or story unfold.
yeah.
And that's cool, and like you're gonna be able to do some really fun interesting things that we haven't even like begun to tap into yet, like with the heart rate monitors and the eye tracking and everything
Mhm,
that are starting to get implemented in these new headsets, like being able to sense somebody's emotional state in the
mhm,
moment and say, okay, well, let's adjust to that emotional state or tweak it to this direction or the other direction or heighten it or bring it down a little bit. Like imagine going through a horror game and they're like, oh, you're not scared enough, let's jack it up a little bit, or like just judging from their heart rate and like how fast your eyes are moving and stuff. And like you can do the same thing for like very punchy emotional like storylines that you go through too, and it adjusts to the person, and that's going to be really fun.
So I've worked on the prototype of that. That is not anymore an NDA, so I can talk about it. It was a haptic cuff. You actually can find that on my website. I might link it later, but we created this cuff called the 5G haptic cuff at the time because we are limited with the current knowledge. But the goal was to think about a device that would come out in 2030 plus, not necessarily at the same time as sunglasses, AR sunglasses, or even neural implants, but even beyond that. Once you're really just connected with technology, there is almost no distinction between you and the tool. And what about the wearable that could exist at that point to be able to capture some of your biometrics? So the cuff would allow you to send haptic feedback in your arm, which was already cool, and have different actuators, vibrators, motors that would be around your wrist, and that could turn. So they would activate themselves like little dots in a chain that would create a sensation of movement. And your brain is actually very capable of understanding sense and rotation movements. So this device could allow people effectively that are blind to actually have a Google Maps based interface that is just through vibrations and no digital visuals, no sound, just knowing exactly when to turn left or right. This could allow people to touch sculptures and have like the sensation of the topology of it by just approaching their hand like a force field. Or effectively, you could create a temperature, which is still part of the touch senses. So you could play a game of hot and cold. Imagine you're lost in a festival and your friends are in different places and you don't know where they are. 3G doesn't work. There's too much Wi-Fi and too much cell phones around. Well, this cuff could allow you to feel that you're getting closer to the person you lost by getting more hot or less. And so
Ooh.
these feelings were interesting to explore. And then we went further and we're like, well, now we have, your veins here. So we can get your heartbeat. And it's proven, in like, for example, in Tibetan culture, that babies, when they are on the on their mothers when they are sleeping, they are syncing their heartbeat to their mom. That's why they fall asleep very better when they are on their mother. And there's some, actually, that's a good tips for you if you get to a point
Yeah, I've
where
got
like,
a 5-week-old, so
yeah, put it on
I've
the belly,
noticed
it
he
helps.
does sleep much better when she's holding him right there.
And so knowing that, you'll be like, how can I create a device that is not just tech based trying to get data from the user, but just making their life better? Maybe someone that is feeling stressed would really love to have their mother heartbeat felt into their wrist or their heart. And you could wear different like devices that could allow to get there. And I'm thinking of what you just said before with interactive narrative or real-time change of narrative in games in the future. And I'm thinking in particular of the game Cats Stray, where you're playing a cat.
Oh yeah, that came
That
out
game
pretty
is so
recently.
profound, and I find that in the first few minutes of the game, you're already caring for this digital cat that normally
Uh-huh.
is not really, it's realistic, it's there, but is not,
Yeah, the graphics aren't like hyper realistic or anything.
they
Like
do have great graphics, but it's true, it's not just like completely immersive. But somehow that first scene when the cat falls, I was crying, or at least my eyes were wet, and I was like,
uh-huh.
why do I care so much about this digital thing? Is because they put all of the things that make me have a good story, like a short from Pixar. All the shorts from Pixar make me cry. And I think that
Mhm.
if you reach that level of emotion on a story, like I've cried reading books, I've cried watching movies, normal that I can cry watching a game. I've never cried in VR, but I've been very close to sensation that makes me feel really emotional. And what you said about catching someone's eye, being able to be present with other people in VR chat, being able to touch something and feeling it. Once we have those right devices around us, I think people will be able to have profound emotions and share that with others. And I think that's the true achievement of artcraft. It's when you
Yeah,
can make people
we're
feel.
still very much discovering the capabilities of like right now VR is just like it's a 2D game or a 3D game that you play on your computer in pancake mode is now being converted into VR. It was the same way when we went from radio to TV. People just had their radio show on TV. Like nobody knew about like making movies or anything. It was just like, all right, now we're just going to talk and film ourselves. And then like people started to discover movies and TV shows and that kind of stuff, and then it's going to be the same in VR. Like right now, we're just replicating what already exists, and we're trying to find that new cutting edge technology that we'll be able to use. Because it's like I'm not gonna wear if I'm playing a game on my computer. I'm not gonna wear like a monitor that like gauges my heart rate, or like I'm not gonna buy like some people will buy accessories for like a steering wheel or different control inputs, but like it's not gonna be
It's
like a
cumbersome.
standard. Yeah, like but now when you put on VR, like, okay, I wanna be as immersed as possible, so I'm gonna wear these sensors, and the headsets are going to start coming with sensors, and your brain's actually surprisingly easy to trick too. So like believing that things are real, like when you're like your eyesight's fully blocked out, and then you start to have these like haptic gloves and stuff, and like your body can't sense wet. Like wet is just like a smooth cold sensation. And so
That is very
if
well
like
said.
we're able to replicate that in a haptic glove like that does temperature change, you'll be able to like dip your finger into water and like feel like you're dipping your finger into water and it's getting wet.
And
Like
with the
that's gonna be
micro
wild.
vibration, get the splash when you touch the surface of the water.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you just said too about how to trick the brain. There's two games in VR that I think I cannot play is Resident Evil, even though it's low graphics, but it shows you that graphics has nothing to do with immersion. Like when the
Hmm.
zombie is running towards you, you want to hide. And
I'm
you
not a
know it's
huge
not
I
true.
can't do horror games very well. It's just, I don't do
Same.
well.
But I do love horror movies because at least I can turn my head or I can close my eyes or the music stops, you know?
I watch it like this. I can only watch the edge of the screen, so I like block the middle out with my fingers, and then I still understand what's going on.
I love that. So I feel like once we get there with, like you said, like a fully immersed, we need to also, and that's the part that I really care about in my design is the ethical side is how do you create safe, safe button, like a emergency exit or disconnect me. I love when you get into some apps in VR that you're able to have like a bubble around your avatar because even the sense of proximity is weird. Like right now, you're on my screen, you're not in my personal space, but if you were in mixed reality with me talking, and you were talking to me and then your face is here, I'll probably move away just by default because I feel like you're in my personal space.
Right.
And being able to have a mechanism, at least in your game, that allow people to create that bubble, or that if they get harassed by anyone, because you get trolls in the internet, you get trolls in VR, being
Hmm.
able to block someone or being able to teleport yourself to a place where there is no one anymore just to feel safe is so important. And those were not the MVP features you will think about when you create a social event, but now you have to.
Yeah, exactly. Like and that's a good point. Like it's so immersive and it feels real and it feels like you're being violated, even though it's like virtual and like technically not real, but your brain perceives it as real, and so like why is that any less real than someone actually doing it? And if we're having a video call like this, yeah, you're right, like I don't feel like you're here in the room with me, like it's I obviously know it's a camera, and it like my brain is not that easy to trick, but
At least I think you're in front of me, which is cool. It feels like I'm
yeah,
having a coffee
exactly.
chat with you.
So let's talk about your newest kind of skill that you're acquiring is AI stuff. Let's talk a
So
little bit like so what are you doing with that right now?
So it's new, I think, from the world's perspective because they call it AI now, and it's like, oh my god, that's the hottest term right now. If you're not making AI in your company, you're not making money. If you want to make money, change the .com to .ai, and you get VC
Yeah.
investors. But I've been in machine learning for so long. I've been since 2014, I think, and at IBM, I was actually specialized in running design thinking workshops, which is workshops to help people actually get to a problem or define their users and solutions and so on around AI. And artificial intelligence is a very broad term. I think it's a bit like XR. You cannot just launch it and then expect people to understand. And right now, I think when people talk about AI, they're talking about very specific use case of machine learning or LLM or data models, which are like ChatGPT, for example, which is more conversational AI and chat. You have AI art, which is a completely specific part of creating art using machine learning. And then somehow people completely forget about what happened with generative art in 5 years ago, or NFTs, which also in many cases were generative artists making NFTs. And same with NFTs. I hate the term. Um, when people talk about NFTs, I think that they forget about what's the inherent technology below, and that's blockchain. And when we talk about Web3, we're just talking about a world that is decentralized versus Web2, which is the normal internet. Same with
Mhm.
metaverse. I don't like the term, but if we talk about XR now, I'm comfortable. And I think metaverse is more than just XR. I think it's XR plus Web3 plus blockchain and AI and so on. So for me, it started really in 2014 when I was working for an adult company, which is funny because I didn't know I was working for an adult company at the time. So you all know it. It starts with a P, and most people, when they type P on their browser, that's what shows up. And I was working for them as a designer, and I was trying to implement UX there. My goal was to actually break into that industry and make it more safe, more reliable, and I actually didn't succeed, but for 2 years that I worked there, I was an art director, and I got the chance to receive the first Oculus SDK on my desk, and the goal was to create the first web adult experience. So we created the first web player for it. It was really cool as an experience. I think YouTube still uses something very similar because adult technology usually inspired the rest of the tech.
Interesting.
um,
Yeah, that was my first VR
yeah.
experience, was a YouTube video of like this tiger walking around the savannah.
Me too. I actually remember that video.
Oh yeah?
Yes, and I still own a lot of my VR headset from there, like Google Cardboard, which is discontinued, the Oculus
Yeah.
Go, the Oculus One. So all of these things were from that era. And at some point, we're thinking, what about IPs? When stars or actors would basically give their name or their voice or their model in 3D so that we can generate more content when they cannot perform. Bruce Willis is a good example right now. He actually sold the right to his face and voice so that making movies with Bruce Willis can be done by the company that owns it right now. Even when Bruce Willis will pass away, they will still be able to produce movies with him, which I'm
Oh,
excited
that's gonna be
for as a
wild.
fan. But it's also weird to think about giving your rights post death. But we're actually used to that. In music, people are releasing music after their deaths all
Yeah,
the time. Juice
there is a
WRLD,
precedent.
XXXTentacion, Michael Jackson, so many examples. So I think generative art for me was a really big moment in art because it allowed me to train the model on my own paintings to generate more art that are digital but that feels like me. And when recently I started working with OpenAI in 2022 using DALI 1 and then DALI 2 in 2022, it opened my mind to so many more stuff, and I was like, wait, the problem was never about the tech. We already had that tech before. The question was, how do you interface people to understand how to use it? ChatGPT is working well because it's a conversation. So it is just how we are used to talk to people now in an interface. So for AI, I think the future is really about multimodalities, like we were saying before. I just don't want just text to image. I want image to image, video to image, MP3 to image to sound to haptics. I want to be able to input anything, go through that machine, and export anything. Once we get there, we'll have a true model that I think feels human. And if you can, have an interface that feels as natural as possible as a conversation, then you hit the mark. And so I
That's
think
gonna be
companies are competing
wild.
on that right now.
That's you're talking about safe button. That's where you need a safe button for. It's like, tell me what's real and what's an AI,
Well,
because
that's
it's
the
gonna
other
be
part
hard
that
to
I think is
distinguish.
is really important is the ethics of AI. So I'm advising companies from a because I'm black. I guess that's why they hire me, but I'm really thinking about it on a more deep level. But I'm from the Caribbean. There's zero representation of the Caribbean, even in black content. So I think there's even layers to this thing. But I'm advising them on diversity inclusion because the model needs to be trained ethically, but also just on the usage. We've seen it with the US election. People will be using this. Bots are already being happening right now with ChatGPT just to steer elections. It will be important that people understand what's real from what's not. And social media is not really a great place for this right now. So AI is just making it harder.
Yeah. Like, oh, there's so much trash out there already. It's hard to distinguish from the real trash and the AI trash now.
Someone said the metric for it is 80% of what we consume by the end of 2023 will be generated in some level. Whether it's a
I
text
believe
prompt,
it.
the caption of your Instagram post. I even use my own voice generated on some of my posts when I have, a flu or something, just to continue to create content. And sometimes I use my avatar. I don't use my face. I think it's
Yeah,
becoming normal.
that's what, like, by the end of this year, like, I'm gonna be able to most likely have a VO, like an AI representation of video of me and voice of me, and being able to write the actual content.
Yeah, but
That's gonna be insane.
AI is fun. I think machine learning as a general term is more fun because it means that we're able to understand, and that's a Elon Musk type of thinking, but if you decompose at the very level of what all of this is, it's almost trying to represent life in a sense. And we're really, really, really robotic in the way that we function, as our body is a machine. The way our brain works is with chemicals drops happening at some specific moment and making us think about very specific things, or traumas, or history, or education. All of it is patterns that we can replicate. So it's really easy right now to just make a human replica, almost uncanny valley, that people will be fooled on if they are starting to talk with them through a chat and not knowing that it's not the right person behind. It's really easy to trick us. So if it
Hmm.
is so easy to trick us, the question becomes, how complex are we really, and what is that part that we cannot really define? And what I love about AI is not the technical side, it's the philosophy behind, is the fact that it's forcing question around what is art, what is ownership, what is copyright, what is consciousness, and what is empathy towards other species. We're having hard time to just be equals as a human species between different genders and races, and now this thing is making us question the very nature of our reality also. So it's forcing the question that we've always put aside and putting them in front of us and forcing us to have to discuss about them. And that's what I love about AI.
Nice. So if you were to predict like 5 years in the future, what is the world gonna look like?
Eesh. Okay, I have two sides. Because I'm optimistic and I'm trying to be the positive futurist, uh, I will tell you what I really believe in, but I do think that there is a risk that we don't get there if the right thing are not done. So for me, in 5 years, I think it's even easier for me to think about 10 years because 5 years is
Okay.
not so far. But let's say 5 to 10, okay? We might get to a point where Apple has released their headset, and it might be like a Macintosh moment, not an iPhone moment. Not everybody is going to have those headsets. My mother probably won't, but at least all the tech savvy people will. It will make a statement on the computation level of what are those headsets capable of, and it will make people understand the value in different industries beyond gaming of what VR can bring. I'm saying VR, but it's mostly mixed reality. I think VR will still exist in some level and form because it's an art form and it exists and it will always exist. It might become more niche, like you said before, for specific experiences, being in your cask and everything. But I think mixed reality will be more uh, general to the point that it will become normal, like 2016 summer when you saw kids in the park playing Pokemon Go and no one understood what it was and it was just a movement. It will be that, but like generally multiple IPs using that. Like Nintendo is probably going to pour content over the layers of augmented
Oh yeah.
reality. You'll get the Fortnites of this world, but in AR. You'll get all of that, and it will be okay. But I think in terms of society, what it will happen at that time is that it will profoundly change the way that people communicate. Social media will have to adapt. It won't, it will be what we have now, but just extra 100%. And I think from a politic level, hopefully that will bring some level of question of what's the value of people? Is it just, are you defined by your job title and your role and your work, or by, what question you can bring to society and how you are happy in your life and what really brings value to you? Because right now we see it with the tech layoff, we see it with the recession. I think COVID just had changed the world forever. But at the same time, we're at a moment of convergence in technology. So in 5 years, if things continue this way, it cannot continue this way. So it will force some very heavy changes, I think, on the way that people are being managed and the world is thinking about work in general. So hopefully by 5, 10 years, we'll get at least closer to a universe basic income. I think art will flourish. Everyone that is right now an artist will be an extra artist, and everyone that is not an artist will be creative in some level and form. It will empower anyone to tell stories, which will create more diversity in stories, will create more choices of what you can consume, and it will be more about your personal experience with technology than the common experience. I think people are, loving a lot the question of disconnecting. This thing is in our hand in every day, and I think it's interesting to think about what's beyond that. What is the life beyond this thing? What is the life of someone that is not connected to this thing with everyone? And is it more personal experience? Do you have your own AI that you talk to? So it's going to be that type of future, I think. And I think that everything will just be a bit more intense. So it will be important to also set boundaries for yourself and reconnect to nature. The critical thinking and the skills of today that we think are just soft skills will become the hard skills of tomorrow.
Ah, that was great. So many comments. So
I want to hear all of them.
I absolutely agree that as partial as I am to VR because I think it's the most fun medium to use and develop in right now, I do think that AR and VR are going to converge into some kind of sophisticated mixed reality that everybody will end up using. So once it gets down to some type of glasses like this that everybody will wear, and or even contact lenses, once they get that down to the point where it's small enough to use every day, like phones will go obsolete. people won't use, computer screens or TVs anymore. It'll just be a hologram you project in your glasses.
Yeah.
And that's going to be crazy because like, yeah, you're talking about like connecting, like we're on our phone constantly right now, but you still put it down from time to time. Imagine just never taking glasses off and
So
like you just have that.
this is important what you just said, because I think that once glasses become so small, or contact lenses in your face, the system, the UX, the operating system behind, will be designed in a way that allow you to have those safe button. So I think that
Mm,
we'll have layers of reality that we can turn on and off. I think VR will be part of MR, if anything. You'll have a
yeah,
button where you can say, it's just a moment in the day where I want to play this video game and be immersed. So I'm tapping this button. I know I'm in a safe space. I'm on my couch. No one is coming in or out of my apartment. I'm safe. Full in, having a good time. But then at some point, I want to disconnect, go back to reality. Maybe I'm disconnecting from everything. I'm don't do not disturb mode in MR almost. No communication, no notifications, no layers. Just like a plain outing in the summer. Like when you're going camping or so on. You have that button.
I
But at
like
the
that.
same time, because it's so convenient and part of your life, the same way that people have Apple Watches or phone right now, it will be like you're lesser of a human if you don't have that layer. The same way that right now, if you don't have Wi-Fi, you are effectively less human. And that's something very critical to think about, is that the countries right now that don't have proper internet connection, proper access to technology and education, are more in a problematic scarcity than the country that don't have access to water but do have access to Wi-Fi. And so in that future, people that will get that device will be seen as the current human as superhuman. But when it becomes the norm, like you said, in 10 to 20 years, it's the one that won't have it that will be lesser human, and the norm will be superhuman.
It
So
it
effectively, right
is
now, you don't
a
have a phone when you go
superpower.
out. You go home, you take your phone back with you. You cannot leave your house without your phone right now. So that's what it
Mhm.
will be.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that it is effectively a superpower. Like I can talk to any human on planet Earth with this, device that I have. And then the next level of that, and I was also thinking when you were kind of mapping out what you think 10 years will be like, the kind of progression of, so like the industrial age was like the first big like kind of revolution where we made machines and that kind of put a lot of manual laborers out of work, as it were. But then they just found different kinds of work. And now we're in the information age. And I think AI is going to basically be the same thing that factories and industrial lines were back in the, industrial age, because I think information is basically going to go out of style, I guess. So it'll be a lot less people. Like there'll still be people like, right now there's still people who work in factories, but it's a lot more automated. There's a lot like, less labor required and more
Amen.
mental thinking. And so I think the next phase with this AI coming in is going to be information is going to be less of a need to be created and more of a need to be edited. And then that's going to free up a lot of people to do this more artistic kind of personal connection type thing that may be like this next phase of like the industrial age and the information age, and then whatever this next age is going to be called. I think we're kind of like in that the very beginning of that transition period right now.
Very well said. It's funny. The first generative artist was in 1950. It was a woman. I forgot her name, but I will remember. And at the time, she was really seen as a futurist of her time. But also, people really didn't understand, and some people even didn't, give credit to it, and thought that, oh, that's a abomination that should not exist, and so on. And you can do the parallel with nowadays AI art. When 2022 happened, it puts out of job a lot of graphic artists, illustrators, and painters, and I feel deeply for that because that's my background. And I had a moment of questioning, like, is this right? Like, are we doing this properly? And like, is this creating more harm than help? And then I realized that there was never a change in human nature or history that never came with pain. It was always through pain that you evolve. And it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that we're doing it properly, though. But I do think that the question against AI is just the fear that we have of evolving. That's always the case. And it's telling more about the companies that are fast to fire people over taking the AI to replace their job because they think productivity is what's important, that is telling about the technology and what it can do. The same way that a car can, you know, literally kill people versus just bringing them from point A to point B. Or photography came in, and artists that are painters were out of job because now they were being paid to represent something really realistically that someone can just click on a button and get. And people were like, well, you're cheating right now. That's not art. And for a long period of time, photography was downplayed. But for a long period of time, photography was elitist. Only some people with a lot of money could have access to it. It requires to sit down and take a second, multiple hours sometimes to take the photos. So it was not easy. And then when it became more compact and perfect and in your pocket, now all of a sudden, everybody had access to it, but it didn't mean that everybody became an artist or a photograph. It just gave access to more people the power to be. And I think the iPhone democratized photography more than the Kodak camera in the 19s, but doesn't mean that everybody's a photograph because they have an iPhone yet. Like I don't
Yeah,
consider
I agree
myself
with
a
that.
photograph. And even when I bought my DSLR, I was not a photograph. I was someone that owns a DSLR. So I think that AI art is the same. It's not everyone that is using Midjourney or DALI that are clicking a button that are artists. It's about the message that you put behind. That is just a tool. And with that tool, you can do great things and you can do great harm, depending how you use it. It's important to make the difference between the intent of an artist and the result of what a tool can create. And for me, I think that's the power of those tools. Like it allows anyone, from the kid that doesn't have access to a computer but can maybe log in Discord on, you know, their local coffee shop and be able to create something quickly and make their idea. It gives them that power. And it's okay because now that kid has a power that it didn't have before thanks to that technology. Doesn't mean that all of the companies laying off all these people because AI is a new revolution. We can get to an age of more productivity and so on. That's the wrong side. That's what we should all be angry against: capitalism, not the tool. The tool will evolve and you cannot unlearn technology. Like we cannot say electricity doesn't exist anymore, we're banning and canceling it. No, it's there. It's there to stay, and people will go on the dark web and continue to make it evolve, even if companies stop doing it. So, how do we use it? How do we think about it properly and make use for it? That's what I'm thinking.
That was a really good point because so I think the like democratizing effectively the camera, the what iPhone did was not put all of the photographers out of business. It just increased the quality of the pictures that ended up coming out. And the people who normally wouldn't have been able to afford a camera were now able to kind of explore that skill. And some people found that they had some tendencies towards, being photographers that they wouldn't have otherwise, done. And it basically like allowed us to find the true photographers in the sea of masses or whatever.
And not just
And
those that had access to photograph.
exactly.
Yeah,
I love that. And
it is democratizing. Is like you said, now putting pressure on everyone so the diamonds can come out.
mhm. Yeah, it's like, okay, now it's really just up to who does the work more to actually like do it, because it's not gate kept at this point.
It's like saying you're not a movie director, but it's like, well, but now Justin can use VR to make his stories, and if he's putting the effort to actually tell stories, then he is effectively now a producer. Doesn't mean everybody that have access to a computer and a line of code can be a producer. No, most will try, more will try, and the one that actually stick to it and put the craft and hone their skills will become. But if they didn't have access to those tools, they couldn't be at all. So thanks to the tool now, there is this capacity. And
Mhm.
beyond that, I think AI in general will now. So the AI art was not intended to be such a buzzword in 2022. I think it was a mistake, but we just ran with it. And now it's interesting to think about what's the next thing, what's the next disturbance, and what is going to be the next challenge for us. And for me, it is industries that have never been challenged before, like the music industry that is making millions of artists, of people that we never getting royalties because they put the triangle sound in the sample that this DJ used and remixed on that concert that became a trend on TikTok, and now that person is getting the views. The guy with the triangle is at home, not knowing that his music is banging in Tomorrowland, not getting any percentage of that. And all these big producer and companies are making stacks of money out of that creativity and diversity and culture. But what happened when everybody can own their rights? What happened when everybody can generate music? When anyone is empowered to make music? Are we going to see the same artist on the top of Apple Music? Are we going to see the same top Spotify playlist? I don't think so. And I think that that is what is interesting, is that every industry eventually will get transformed the same way the internet forced everyone at some point to have to think about making a website or an app. And it's not the one that you thought will win at the end that did. And right now, what's left is just the one with the either privileges or good intentions. And it's interesting to think about other industries that are not just in entertainment and art, like government, education, jurisdiction. Schools are really scared right now with ChatGPT. YouTube was already a
Mm.
kick in the face
Mhm.
for universities, but public school now is trying to think about, wait a minute, people can really learn at home. That's a problem. We need to find a way to break this. Or jurisdiction are just forced to create laws to protect us around that.
So this is where blockchain comes in. So you're talking about breaking like the industry norms of, and like the triangle guy not getting the credit or monetary compensation that they deserve. This is where blockchain comes in because then you are effectively making an NFT for your music
Yep.
or your art that you created via, some AI software. But then you can effectively hard tag it so that like no matter where this piece of music goes or this art goes or anything, it's always going to be traced back to you, and then you're always going to get some kind of monetary compensation whenever this like element is used in some song or whatever, and that's going to be really cool.
Yes. I think that tracing is super important for anything that goes through a lot of transformation before the end product. We have it for food now. We're able to say this cow was,
Hmm.
groomed with the perfect, grass in Alabama, and it's like, cool. Now I trust this steak and I can eat it. Um, we're able to say those are salmon of Atlantic, and then have the traceability and being sure that it goes all the way back to it. So, we're the same way we do that with food, the same way we should be able to do it with anything. AI art is a bit more hard, right? Because effectively it's trained on a model and generating novel output. A lot of people think that it's collage, but it's not how it works, and you cannot trace back where it's from. There's this controversy that came out a couple days or weeks ago. Someone came up with a website that you input an AR art and it tells you what the image that was used was, and so that you can find the artist. But that's not how it works. You cannot do that. Effectively, the models are actually generating novel art. It's just trained on models. But what would be interesting is that the people creating those tools at the first step when they are actually training them on content, whether it's free content, copyrighted content or not, but at least tag it and find a way that the tagging can be through the generation as well. So that not only we can say, thanks to that list of people, this was being able to be existing, but also to be able to say, hey, if this thing ended up making money, would be maybe fair that those people get a percentage, even if it's a 0.1. But on the mass market of media consumption, at least some people is getting that money and not just the platforms, because it's about owning. And like you said with blockchain, it's about decentralizing what's happening right now, which is the creators are not getting money. Like, you're on YouTube, you're probably getting peanuts compared to what Google is making of your creativity. And
Hmm.
thanks YouTube for making the platform. I'm grateful, and we're able to use it and be creative. But after having made so much billion, don't you think we should be able to redistribute it? And if we can't, and you can be copyright claimed, taken down, banned, hacked, or lose your account, maybe it will be fair that at some point there is a way for you to get your content out and have your own platform so that you can benefit fully from your audience that is not following YouTube but Justin. And I think that's what people are
Exactly.
seeing with Web3. It's not the NFT pyramid scheme. I don't like that part. What I like is about the potential of a new society that is not built on the current conceptions.
Yeah, that's the cool part, and what a lot of people don't understand with like the whole NFT. It's like, oh, you're just buying like, what is it, like a trading card or something?
Yeah.
Like it's just a picture. Why not just screenshot the picture and then you have the picture? It's like, no, no, no. It's the traceability back to the artist is the really wild, revolutionary part of this technology.
Like, we need a second market for musicians. That's what it means. And third
Yeah.
and fourth and fifth market.
And so, like, the next websites that come up that start to use this kind of technology, when, you play a song, you can, like, click on the credits, so you can see every single, like, artist that, contributed to it and, like, even how much they're getting paid based off of, like, their
Yeah.
contribution and how much that, NFT was.
So there are websites doing this already. I won't list them because I'm not associated with anyone right now. But there are things that I think are beyond just that, which is more interesting to me, which is the remixing. We've seen with Midjourney a lot of that. Like they, by default, your prompts are public, and people can just go on community page and actually steal prompts. People are like, oh, but, I want to pay $20 more per month so that it's only for me, and I'm going to be a prompt engineer and get paid for just retaining information. That's the opposite of what they are trying to do. So instead, what would be cool is that it's always public. Everybody can learn from each other, and it's not just about you found the right suit of words to make art, but about the message you're creating with that. The goal is not just to output
Hmm.
an image and sell that image as an NFT and make 5,000. The goal will be for any kids in a country that is obscure that no one knows about to tell the story that their grandmother from their grandmother knows, and then create a cool story around that and share that. But to be able to do that, that kids needs inspiration from other people, and everybody is kind of community based storytelling in a sense. And I find that it would be interesting to think about remixing as a superpower. The same way TikTok allows anyone to take any TikTok and remix it with their own, still referencing back to the original TikTok. It would be nice that if there's a music that comes out tomorrow, and I think some artists try to do that, releasing on specific platform that allow you to get the stem or and so on. But I think beyond that, it's about here is the music that I made. You love it, you buy it. But on top of that, if you get inspired to make more music out of that, do it. And as you do, I'll get some royalties because you've used my work, but also you will get the praise of using my work and you get more audience. And win win. Everybody's happy. The same
Yeah.
when an NFT artist sells their work, they know someone is buying it for X amount of Bitcoin. But if tomorrow they sell it again, at least you get a percentage, and that person also gets something because they're selling cool art that they love. And curation is as much of a artistic endeavor as being an artist unique, because being able to curate a Pinterest board and or Tumblr or a Skyblog at the time was something of value. Memes account is a form of art. Being able to curate meme that make people feel something, that's a form of art. Maybe I'm not the greatest meme artist, but I respect the people that do that. I know it
Uh,
comes with work and intelligence. So I think we're
that's
starting to
I'm
discover new layers with this.
uh-huh. That's I think this next so after talking, I think this next age is going to be the age of transformation. So
I
it's
like that.
not going to be so I think content and information is going to almost become obsolete. It's going to get so inflated. There's going to be so much out there that you'll be able to access. There like already is. Like you can look anything up on YouTube right now. And so it's not necessarily the content that gets put out. Like the people who are selling courses right now, like this, VR course that I have right now is going to be obsolete in 3 to 5 years because one, it's going to be outdated, and two, there's going to be so much other content out there that's like, I'm not going to need to put out those kinds of videos or be able to sell the course for the price that I'm selling it at now because there'll be other information out you'll be able to get for free. But if I provide some kind of transformation or if I have some kind of coaching program or something where I walk you through this, you becoming you're stuck in a 9 to 5 corporate job and I provide and guide you through this transformation to become a VR developer, then that's going to be much more valuable and last a whole lot longer. And the same thing with being able to make memes, like everyone's just going to be able to generate a meme, but are you able to provide that emotional transformation or mental transformation of getting across your idea and making someone go, oh, that's interesting, or that's something I want to think about, or like that makes me feel an emotion. Like that's going to be the sticky part and like the thing that people will strive for in this next phase, I think.
So to make it full cycle with what we started this conversation with, I was telling you that I think the soft skills of today are becoming the hard skills of tomorrow. And I'll tell you why I love your brand. Okay. Get your flowers for a second. I know this is not about you, but it's more about how you interview me, but I want to tell you that because it fits that narrative. I believe that anyone can learn from anything and they can learn on their own. I don't think that we need tutors or educators. But the reality is that the content is never really, I would say, customized for everyone and the way that they learn. And it's so unique that you don't want to ask a giraffe to climb a wall. Like they are not maybe capable of doing it with their physical side. So the way that I think about it is yes, like creating a course right now makes sense. And I think your course is amazing. So being able to buy that knowledge in a price that is affordable for the people that can, and then learning the current space makes a lot of sense. You might be right that in 5 years it's obsolete unless you continue to put out some content and it's always updated, but that will tire you. And there's probably other ways to make money or to help more people. Instead, I think the value of following Justin is the familiarity we have with him. It's being part of that community, being able to interact with him, being able to send him a Twitter and he will be replying if he has time. And more people get to know Justin. Eventually, it's going to be harder to reach out to him directly, but the people he will empower and teach will then have kind of a trickle down domino effect of teaching others. And that's the main reason why I'm actually not even working on a course. I wanted to make a course about AI. So many people have reached out to me and be like, please do a course. I'll pay 200, 300, $10,000. Like, yes, of course, and I get it. But the second I stop and I make the course, it is to me already obsolete. Instead, I'd rather provide free education, coaching. Maybe the coaching is paid when it's for a company and it's more accessible when it's for an individual. I'm advising company and getting percentage or working with VCs directly. And this is my way of teaching and educating. But people, they are not buying my knowledge. They are buying the way that I think about that knowledge. And when I watch VR courses, I can go on any other website. I've been through Circuit Stream. I have my education certificate from them. I've done the Unity Learning Path. I've done the IBM Learning Path. I even built a curriculum for IBM. Why do I stick to your channel? Is because it feels familiar. It's like the radio show where you have a familiar voice, or watching that same guy telling you the news on that news channel every day at that time. It feels like I'm actually watching Justin telling me something. And so I think that this is the value that you have, is that you're able to translate technology in a way that is approachable for your audience. Maybe not everybody on earth can be your target audience, but the one that you created and the community that you have, they all have in common the fact that they can learn from you. And so if you can continue to curate that, make it feel home and make it have value over time, you probably have, your YouTube channels, your Twitter account, or Discord, whatever it is, but that can grow beyond the platform that they are on right now. And the people that are sticking to you because of that personality, regardless of where you go tomorrow, they will follow you because of that. Maybe you might lose some in the process, that's okay. But tomorrow they won't be there because you have a new course out. They'll be there because, oh, Justin is still pushing out content. So that's my kind of testimony to you on the long term evolution of VR, is that regardless of what you teach, I think the passion that you show in your video, the way that you teach, that's the profound soft skills that right now maybe is disregarded by companies. They might not be paying you the same amount of doing it freelance. But tomorrow, though, they will need people like you, because everybody will be able to make content, but not everybody will have that soft skill. So that's this flip of
Oh,
table that I think I would see seeing in the future.
well, I appreciate that. That was
There you go.
thank
Get
you.
your flowers.
Yeah, sweet. So we're getting close to an hour. Where can people find you and go and see those soft skills?
So I am on every platform at either my name, Manuel Sainsily, but the easiest is manu.vision or Manu Vision directly. And if you, actually my website is my username. So if you go on https://manu.vision, you actually get on my personal website. There's my portfolio, links to all the social networks. Instagram is probably the best way to reach out to me. I really like that platform because it's more in your face and visual, and I can curate my content. But I'm also on Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, all of the above. And I'm starting to think about where should be my next platform that is not owned by those big corporations, that can grow a community as well. I've made Discords in the past, I've made Patreons, but I feel like I'm still not 100% sure that this is the best for me and the way that I do. So that's why right now most people see videos on other platforms about me than me making videos about myself. So right now I exist in the Justin metaverse thanks to that.
Yeah,
Thank you for allowing
exactly.
me to be here.
Interesting. Yeah, there is. I feel like we are there is like a gap in the market for something.
Yeah, we need
It's,
a new social media that is more in tune with how people interact nowadays. That feels
yeah.
more real.
All right.
But in the
I do
meantime,
like
we
having
got
your
the
username as your website. That's fun.
yeah. It
That's
took a
super
while
cool.
to get the actual URL, but I'm happy it works. So it's Manu that
Very
vision.
nice. Well, I appreciate you for coming on. This was amazing. I'm sure I'll have you back on here in the near
Anytime.
future because this was pretty fun.
I love this, and
And
I would love to. We should do one after like a year, just to see if our
yeah,
thinking has still evolved or is still the same
yeah. See
target.
if we're in the same track or not. I
Yeah,
like that. I'm down. Cool.
this was cool,
Well,
and I
yeah.
enjoyed your
I'll link
question.
everything in the description and in the show notes and everything. And yeah, thanks for jumping on.
Thanks, Justin, and thanks for your question. The genuine, passion that we have for tech, and excited for continuing to follow you. Bye, everyone.